"Ma'am, I can't find my daddy," the little girl said. The female CEO ran after her toward the woods. There are moments in life that strike like lightning, sudden, blinding, and impossible to forget. For Evelyn Hart, a woman whose world revolved around deadlines, boardrooms, and Fortune 500 responsibilities, that moment came on a quiet winter afternoon when she was driving back from a stressful investor meeting through the snowy backroads of Montana. She had been exhausted, her chest tight with the weight of decisions that could shape entire futures. But everything changed, every priority, every worry, when her headlights cut through the falling snow and illuminated a tiny figure standing alone in the middle of the forest road. A little girl, barely 3 or 4, shivering, tears frozen against her rosy cheeks, her small red dress trembling in the winter wind. And when Evelyn stepped out and knelt in front of her, the child whispered words that made Evelyn's heartbeat stop. "Ma'am, I can't find my daddy. If you believe in kindness, compassion, and second chances, please take a moment to like, comment, share, and subscribe. Stories like this deserve to be heard." Evelyn had built her life on precision and control, but at that moment she felt neither. The little girl's blue eyes were wide with terror, her hands trembling as she reached out instinctively for warmth. Snowflakes clung to her eyelashes, and her lips quivered with exhaustion. Evelyn's heart cracked, raw and immediate, in a way it hadn't since she was a child herself. She gently wrapped her coat around the girl's tiny shoulders, the expensive wool swallowing her small frame. For years, Evelyn had believed emotions were distractions, yet here she was, unable to think of anything else except protecting this fragile child who had somehow stumbled into her path. The forest around them was eerily still, the trees standing like frozen sentinels while daylight dwindled faster than usual. Evelyn glanced at the girl's footprints in the snow, small and staggering, leading from the woods to the road. The thought of how far she had wandered alone made her chest tighten. The wind howled softly, carrying with it a sense of urgency that Evelyn couldn't ignore. She asked the girl where her father was, and though the child tried to explain, her words were lost in trembling breaths and broken sobs. But she kept pointing back toward the woods, deeper into the shadows where the trees grew denser and the cold harsher. Evelyn felt an instinctive pull, one that told her that time was running out. Despite her reputation as a fearless CEO, Evelyn had always been terrified of the dark woods. Childhood memories lingered, memories of being lost once during a school field trip, memories her mind had buried but her heart never forgot. Yet the sight of the little girl desperately gripping her coat sleeve pushed every fear aside. Evelyn lifted her gently, feeling how cold her small hands were, and followed her gestures toward the forest. She carried a flashlight from her car, its narrow beam slicing through the snow-filled air, and stepped off the road and into the unknown. The forest swallowed them quickly, the silence becoming thicker, heavier. The falling snow muted every sound except the crunch of Evelyn's boots. She held the girl close, whispering soothing words even though she wasn't sure the child understood. Something inside Evelyn, a buried maternal instinct she had long convinced herself she didn't possess, rose to the surface. She had spent years avoiding emotional attachments, throwing herself into her work after losing her mother at a young age. She believed life was safer when she kept people at a distance. But now, holding this fragile child, she realized how wrong she had been. The girl clung to her, trusting her completely despite being strangers. They walked deeper, and the air grew colder. Evelyn's breath formed clouds as she called out into the vast woods, hoping desperately to hear a reply. But nothing came. The girl pointed again, her tiny voice trembling as she murmured something about her daddy falling. Evelyn's pulse quickened. A fall in these conditions, snow-covered, freezing temperatures, could be fatal if help didn't arrive soon. She pushed forward with urgency, scanning the ground for clues. That's when she noticed broken branches and disturbed snow leading slightly downhill. Her heart pounded with dread. Minutes stretched into what felt like hours as she followed the trail until she heard something faint, a strained, muffled groan carried by the wind. Evelyn froze, listening. There it was again. She moved faster, pushing through thick branches until her flashlight caught the outline of a man lying near the base of a small incline. He wasn't moving. Snow had covered parts of his jacket, and his skin had taken on a frighteningly pale shade. The little girl reached out toward him from Evelyn's arms, whimpering a soft plea. Evelyn knelt beside the man, brushing snow from his face. He was breathing, but shallowly, and his leg was twisted unnaturally beneath him. He must have slipped on ice and fallen hard. Her business instincts kicked in, quick thinking, fast decisions, no hesitation. She checked for bleeding, kept his airway clear, and tried to rouse him. He opened his eyes weakly, just enough to see his daughter. Relief washed over his face, mixing with pain. Evelyn reassured him that they were going to get help, even though she wasn't entirely sure how. They were too deep in the woods for cell service, and carrying a full-grown man through the snow would be impossible. She had to act fast. Wrapping her scarf around his leg to stabilize it temporarily, Evelyn gathered branches and snow to create makeshift insulation, shielding him from the worsening cold. She tucked her coat tighter around the little girl to keep her warm. The storm grew heavier. The sky dimmed. The temperature dropped. Evelyn felt fear trying to claw its way back into her chest, but she didn't let it. She refused to let this man and child suffer alone. She refused to walk away. Determined, she lifted the girl again and told the injured man she would return with help. She ran through the snow, her lungs burning, her legs aching, the howling wind slicing through her clothes. Fear pushed her forward. Compassion fueled her strength. She stumbled at one point, scraping her knee, but she didn't slow down. She knew every second mattered. When she finally broke through the trees and reached the road, she was breathless and trembling, but she wasted no time. She drove until she regained signal, called 911, then raced back with the emergency responders. Snow plumes rose behind their vehicle as they sped through the forest road. Evelyn led them exactly to the injured father, her heart pounding with anxiety until she saw him still breathing. They carefully lifted him onto a stretcher and wrapped thermal blankets around him. The little girl clung to Evelyn, refusing to let go even as the paramedics tried to take her to the ambulance. Evelyn stayed right beside her, promising silently that she would not leave her alone again. At the hospital, hours later, after doctors confirmed that the man, whose name was Daniel Brooks, would survive, Evelyn finally allowed herself to breathe. The little girl, whose name she learned was Lily, had fallen asleep in her lap, exhausted but safe. The sight of her small hand curled around Evelyn's finger stirred something indescribable inside her, a warmth she had not felt in years. Daniel, still recovering but conscious, weakly thanked her, his voice filled with gratitude and disbelief. Evelyn brushed it off humbly, but deep down she knew that if fate had been even a little different, the ending might have been far worse. Daniel explained that he had taken Lily for a short walk, slipped, and lost consciousness. Lily must have wandered off looking for help. As the hours passed, the hospital staff encouraged Evelyn to stay with Lily until relatives arrived from out of town. What struck Evelyn most was how natural it felt to care for the child, how instinctively she held her, reassured her, soothed her. Her heart softened in ways she never imagined possible. The life she had lived, cold offices, endless hours, emotional walls, felt suddenly distant and hollow. Lily's tiny voice later asked Evelyn if she could stay until her daddy woke up again. Evelyn said yes without hesitation. Relationships, Evelyn realized, were risks worth taking. Life wasn't meant to be measured in quarterly results or stock values but in connections, real human connections that breathed purpose into every day. She remembered how lonely she had been after losing her mother, how she had built a fortress around her heart without even realizing it. But this little girl, lost and afraid, had unknowingly opened a door Evelyn had kept locked for decades. As Daniel healed, Evelyn continued visiting them. She brought warm meals, toys for Lily, and even helped Daniel navigate the medical paperwork. What started as responsibility transformed into genuine attachment. Evelyn began staying longer,